Lightning like Steve McQueen. I'm in the fast lane when the light turns green. And I built tough, I ain't nothing but grit. Cause I made rugged blood, sweat, and spit. Yeah, like a horse I fly. Better push yourself in for a bumpy ride. I like to play hard, but I work harder. And I weather the storm cause I'm built stronger.
What is up, ladies and gentlemen? We are back. We are live. It is the Freight Coach Morning Show, the top morning show in transportation, coming to you guys every single weekday, 8:30 a.m. Pacific, 10:30 Central, to break down some industry headlines. And most importantly, provide some actual insight into what you can do with all of this information. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome. This is the real side of freight, ladies and gentlemen. And I say that before every single show. And what I mean by that is I only speak to transportation professionals on this show, as well as my twice a week long form podcast, because I want to talk to the right individuals who have done what you're looking to do or who are currently doing what you're trying to achieve. So you can take that information, apply it, utilize it, and see a meaningful difference in your business and your life. Corey Buchan, happy Monday. All let's go. He's watching over on YouTube. Nick, my man, he says, let's go big. Chris Flo, good morning and happy Monday. Carla Isted, good morning to you as well. And I got a very special guest for you guys here today. He's been on numerous times before. And, you know, the FMCSA released some stuff last week about a plan to revamp the registration process and all of that fun stuff. So I thought, who better than to have come on my show to talk about the carrier registration process than my man Kyle Provost with Broker Carrier. Kyle, what is going on?
Good morning, buddy. How are you?
Oh, dude, I'm doing well. Need more coffee. Need to keep getting amped up. It's a big week this week, man. We got a lot of stuff going on. It's I'm actually flying to Nashville Thursday night. SPI Logistics does their annual, they call it Rendezvous. It's like all their agent meetup out there. So they're doing an event out in Nashville. So I'm going to be going live from Nashville on Friday morning with my man, Mike Mikulik. And yeah, man, it's an action-packed week this week.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's going to be a busy one over here too. We got, we have 7 integrations in progress. A huge overhaul coming to our data, to our search capabilities. I mean, it's going to be probably easily an 80-hour week over here as well. Yeah, dude, it's so crazy because, I mean, you can attest to this. And it's like when you first get started, it's like kind of like filling the gaps, right? Of your time to keep you focused. And then eventually you start to realize like, all right, this doesn't move the needle. This doesn't move the needle. And then you get to the point where I kind of feel like we're at right now is it's like all day long is like execution. And I love it. Like I absolutely love it. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially today with there being so many software startups and everybody thinks they've got a unique spin on how to solve a problem. And there's a million different approaches and a million different companies coming and going. You realize that the timeline to reach traction is just longer and longer and longer every time. And so for us, we caught traction pretty good at 2 years, but then the problems started changing. The fraud landscape started changing. And then we had to go back and really, you find yourself thrown back to the phase of doing development work and prep work. But we're finally there. This thing is dialed in. We've got the problem figured out, and now it's time to execute, which for us comes in the form of getting integrated with TMSs so our customers don't have to hand jam information in 2 different tabs, right? And
yeah.
That's the piece that we're going to focus entirely on for this whole year. It's all I'm doing for the next 4 or 5 months. We're ready to rock, and we're rocking fast now. I'm really, really loving this bit.
And that's exactly it, right? Is we just found so many people who needed to, the integration piece was, it was a lot to kind of, because it's like, from us, I think we wanted to get our stuff dialed in before we started reaching out to integration partners and everything else, because I think, you were kind of in the exact same situation is you didn't want to do an integration and then 6 months later be like, hey, we're revamping everything. We found this. So it was like, we got it to the point to where we have everything locked in from a product standpoint. And now that's just that next iteration of business right now. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah. The term startup kind of belies its own definition. You're a startup for like 7 years, not 1 year.
No, that's exactly it. And, again, and this is just one of those things, and I wanted to bring this up while I got you on the show here is, here we go. Perfect. This is our free vetting tool, right? So you like anybody can go out there and put, and this was actually somebody who I stopped last week before I even like reached out to anybody, to work with them, because anytime I talk to carriers, because, again, this was kind of one of the things we wanted to talk about is, how do we vet carriers, right? And for our big thing out there is like, if you don't have the ability to pay for onboarding or anything like that, we put a free tool out there. And I literally use this every single time I talk to a carrier. And, we pulled this up and I ended up not using them because, this is all on the free tool here, you guys, is there's 45 different carriers that use this mailing address. So I'm like, boom, not happening. We're not using them. And we just went out and found another carrier. But like, that was one of those things that like, I love the most, right? Because it's like, it's quick, it's easy, it's seamless. And like, this is how I've used the decision-making process on if I'm going to set somebody up or if I'm going to work with them or not.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's largely what makes us different from our competitors is simply not that our product is exceptionally different. There's only so many ways to skin a cat, so to speak. But philosophically, you and I have agreed since the beginning that this piece of the puzzle, the carrier vetting and onboarding piece of the puzzle, should not be expensive, and it should not be treated like it's the crux of the whole process, right? Because you understand better than most that what a freight broker does is resell carrier capacity, right? So if you're in this constant loop of having to scramble to onboard new carriers and add new capacity every time you're going to move freight for your customer, then you're fundamentally doing that part of the job wrong, right? So to go out there and create some high dollar whiz bang service that can help you onboard a carrier in 5 minutes really misses the point.
Yeah.
The ability to vet a carrier's information, screen them for any obvious signs of potentially being fraudulent. That's an online lookup. That's access to mostly public data, right? And I think that we've really hit the mark by releasing that free tool, with the caveat that the free tool has data that can potentially be up to 10 days old.
Yeah.
Even though that's perfectly fine 98% of the time. But we've already conducted almost 2 million searches through that tool. And interestingly enough, 90% of the searches are for MC numbers. I never believed that the whole industry was based on MC numbers. It always seemed weird to me, but it sure seems to be. But we know which ones to look for, which series of MC numbers to keep an eye on, and it's really working out. Freight brokers are getting great benefit from it. They're giving us great feedback, and I'm really happy and proud to be able to provide that tool to the industry.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where it's like when I'm out there searching for capacity, right? Because it's not always, hey, this customer hits you up for a last minute spot market load, start posting and try and find capacity. I'm out there actively making outbound calls to develop capacity, right? Because I want to find the carriers who are always running these lanes. I don't want to find the truck just for today. I want to find the truck for the next 30, 60, 90, 100 truckloads that I move for a customer of mine. So it's like, I have that pulled up to even see, like, do I even want to call this carrier to make an outbound call to them to see if that's a lane that they run or not? And again, from a time save perspective and an efficiency perspective, that's what's like, I think that's what you need to focus in on, because like, I think a lot of people out there are discrediting what this next market shift is going to lead to. And it's going to be tightened capacity. People are not going to be calling in on your load postings at all. And you're going to have to get out there and develop capacity the old fashioned way, kind of how I used to have to do it back in the day when I didn't even have access to a load board. I had to only call carriers outbound. It's not that we didn't have it. That was just the training, right? Whereas like for the first 90 days, you cannot post. And that was the whole thing, is make those outbound calls. So now it's like with everything that kind of goes on out there, and with, the rise in, in bad actors and everything else, this is just another quick way where, again, especially when you're building your business up and, Kyle and I both being bootstrap founders in our past, is like, we wanted to put this out there for those individuals who are just trying to get their first customer, right? Like their first load, and they don't want to fuck it up, right? So it's like, this is a great way for you to get out there and just check the people before you even call them.
Yeah, absolutely. The more you can pre-screen, the better. And that's not even just freight. That's any industry. Know who you're dealing with on both sides. Know your customer, know your vendor. I mean, the information is power these days. We're in a world that's ruled by data. So if you have quick and easy access to data, then you have quick and easy access to the tools that can prevent you from making really serious mistakes.
Yeah. Robert, I'm looking forward to Nashville, man. He says I'm working remotely from Nashville all week. I get in late Thursday night, brother. So I'll definitely see you. We'll have to try and meet up on Friday before Rendezvous kicks off. Tracy St. Clair, good morning to you. But yeah, let's break down this article here. So this is from ttnews.com, you guys, and this is just the FMCSA plans to revamp the registration process. Anti-fraud provisions, some immediate, are slated. So federal regulators are in the early stages of developing a new online registration process aimed at reducing fraud and improving transparency and efficiency for the registration of motor carriers, transportation brokers, insurance companies, and other users. The new process, if approved by the Office of Management and Budget, would modernize the unified registration system, replacing it with a process that would be renamed the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration Registration System. I wonder how much money they spent on like a fucking meeting just to come up with that name. Like they probably spent at least $1 million.
Oh yeah, some branding consultant got paid 6 figures for that one, I'm sure.
Oh, minimum.
I mean, the government's first love is acronyms, and the longer the better.
It does say it is planned for the implementation early next year, according to Kenneth Riddle, the director of FMCSA's Office of Registration and Safety Information. And Riddle spoke on April 24th at the agency's Safety Research Forum and said the system will include fraud-resistant security features, be more intuitive and not as cumbersome, include improved data quality and real-time data validation, and then use a smart logic and edit checks and consolidate most of the forms used in the current registration process. So Kyle, you're a guy who just like fucking loves code and everything else computers. So to break this down, how do you make this data more quality? Like with the current registration process, what can they do to make it a higher quality piece of data?
Okay, so with the current process, you have to provide your articles of incorporation or your articles of agency for your trucking company that you've set up, and really not much else. You just need to have an identity that can sort of pass as being legitimate in the US, and then you go through their system. And the real issue is you create a unique DOT account with a DOT PIN that only exists under the umbrella of DOT. Right. So it's not even appropriate to call that a unified registration system because something else exists already. What you need to do is tie all dealings with the government into your identity as an American taxpayer, whether you're a citizen or a permanent resident or a corporation that's owned by a citizen. Right. There are ways to conduct multi-level verification that you are who you say you are. And the DOT is really just not forcing that issue with new registrations right now. You can obtain a DOT PIN by filling out 2 simple forms online and providing 1 set of documents. Mm-hmm. So what I really like from this article is it's kind of buried way down here, but there's this bulleted list. And the second item is implementing a login.gov requirement through which registration users would need to authenticate themselves to enter agency systems. That's the big one. I don't know why that's not the highlight of this article, because I use login.gov. You have to use that to get access to your VA benefits online. That requires you to have a social security number or a taxpayer ID that matches, when you do identity verification, you hold up your phone and you do the turn your head all over the place kind of selfie. Yeah. You have to go through that process. You have to provide a copy of your photo ID, and you have to have either a social security number or a permanent resident taxpayer identification number. Okay, that cuts out 85% of the problem right there. Okay, so by forcing them to use login.gov accounts in order to create DOT accounts, that's a huge step, and that cuts out a lot of your overseas bad actors and a lot of your identity thieves right there. Okay. Then the requiring that a PIN request be mailed to an applicant's address that's on file. I'm honestly very surprised that that's not already the process. Government typically doesn't communicate by email, certainly not anything important. Yeah. Right. Like we know that the IRS famously never communicates anything important by email, only newsletters. Yeah. Okay, so it should have been this way from the very beginning, right? Because right now what we're seeing, the reason why we have to monitor for changes in contact information, especially with emails, is because the way that scammers are getting in and stealing identities is they run a phishing scam, right? They send a falsified email to the carrier that has the appearance of being from the DOT, saying you need to file some form, you need to update your information, or you're being audited for some reason. And then the carrier clicks through to what appears to be a DOT login form. They put in their DOT PIN, and now the scammer has it. Then the scammer can go onto the real DOT website using that PIN and only that PIN. That's all they need to log in and change the official on-file information in the DOT records. Okay, so we can't even really trust that half the time anymore if it's recently changed. Now, by requiring a login.gov account, requiring them to use that process, you completely cut off that head of the hydra. It's gone, right? So that needs to be done yesterday.
Yeah. Is that something? So let me just ask you this. So say I own a trucking company that has, 3 trucks. I'm the owner of the company. I'm the one who would have to go in there, do the facial recognition on the IRS or login.gov requirements. And then anybody to access that information would essentially need my fucking face to be able to get in to change anything. Is that what I'm understanding with that?
They would need your login.gov credentials, which is, there's mandatory 2-factor authentication. So once you've verified your identity and done the biometric scan in order to be able to create the login.gov account, from that point forward, you not only need to know your username, which is not just your email address, you have to make up a username and a password, and you have to have access to the 2FA method, which would either be your email address or your phone number. Right now, it's a pretty tall order for a scammer to get their hands on all of that.
Yeah.
Right. And even something as simple as like when you log in with a DOT PIN, there should be a 2FA step right there, which there apparently isn't, since scammers are able to execute this process. But yeah, there's really no way to fake a login.gov account, to fake those credentials. I mean, they're very strict. They're very difficult to work with. I mean, I log in to check on my VA benefits maybe 2 or 3 times a year, and I have to change the password every time. I have to verify a code that they send to my phone number and a code that they send to my backup email. If a scammer is able to obtain both your phone number and your email, then something much more nefarious has happened to you. Like, the police need to be involved. It's not just a simple scam run,
Yeah. And it's, so Dan Horvath, who's the Senior Vice President of Regulatory Affairs for the American Trucking Association, says that we're supportive of the FMCSA enhancing the registration system to avoid or at least reduce the amount of fraud from individuals out there to either steal DOT numbers or become chameleon carriers. We don't want to make it so difficult that legitimate carriers have trouble getting a new registration or getting a DOT number. But we also want to make sure that a carrier that has been shut down by DOT for compliance or safety reasons can't easily get a DOT number and continuing operating like nothing changed. We know that's been a problem for years. And what he's bringing up there is, this is a case that I've talked about kind of extensively on this show, but a couple of years back when that trucking company from Houston, Texas had a driver kill a bunch of people in Colorado due to a bunch of errors, they were like a brand new carrier the next day. So what this is doing is avoiding their ability to essentially shut down and reopen the very next day, or at least prolongs that. And I think that right there, from a safety perspective, Kyle, is also going to, again, like, because we've talked about this a lot, like the biggest way to fight a lot of this stuff is you got to raise the standards, right? Like, you have to raise the barrier to entry. You shouldn't be able to go in and buy 7 different authorities and everything else and then just switch to the next one and have them all registered under the next one. Like, there needs to be a due diligence process that comes along with this. And I think them putting that in there is it's a positive step. Now, again, is it going to eliminate it? No, nothing's ever going to eliminate criminals and fraud, because I hate to break it to you guys, that's kind of what they do. They don't fucking pay attention to the laws. But I just think that from my perspective, though, anything they can do to stop that aspect of it, that also will severely reduce any of the people who just jump from authority to authority and then just change everything overnight, essentially, and then they can open up and operate the very next day.
Yeah. And what this would do is require it to be a different owner in order to pull that same scam, right? Because if you're able to unincorporate one company and then file a new entity with the Secretary of State. You can go online, you fill out one form to get an EIN. So if you go the next day to form a new trucking company using that corporate identity, according to the DOT system, or at least it appears anyway, to be a new party, a new entity that didn't exist yesterday, even though it's the same people. So if you require that the person who is conducting this process has to be using a login.gov profile, right? If they want to go so far as to switch who the owner is and what the ownership share of the company is, then they could potentially still get by it by having the process conducted by a different person. But what you would cut off is the ability for the same person or the same owner to go and create a new trucking company the next day, even though they've been, had their authority revoked or had their number deactivated for safety violations. And even then, there should be a slight review and diligence process right afterward, where you take any relevant information, kind of like what we do when we match up, does more than one carrier have this address or this email or this phone number? You go and just run a match like that, and you can quickly see probably 80% of these idiots would use the same address, same mailing address, or same registered agent or something that you could match up, and you would know that it's a reincarnated entity, right?
Yeah.
But the current process just doesn't even conduct those checks, clearly, right? Since so many people were able to do this.
And then it also says here, and kind of wrapping up this article, is that motor carriers, brokers, and freight forwarders must designate an agent in every state in which they operate and traverse proceedings before the transportation secretary or court of law may be made. Wiley Deck, a former FMCSA deputy administrator, said that the agency has for years wrestled with the problem of unsavory carriers falling through the cracks by registering as new companies. He said, ideally, it would help if several databases could talk to each other, making it easier to flag bad actors. Wiley Deck, FYI, we got our API documentation is published on our website. If you want to just hit up Kyle Provost, Kyle at brokercarrier.com. He can fucking walk you through all of that. But he said, because I bring that up because that would be a fairly complicated ballot to change over to a totally new system. The system we're trying to navigate now is definitely in a transition period, said Kiefer Light, an attorney with transportation law firm Scopolitis, Garvin, Light, Hansen, and Feary. That's a fucking tongue name. With all of these changes that are coming up, we haven't yet seen how they're going to disrupt the legislation process. And then a paralegal with their firm, Susan Latesh, who works with the firm's client runs registration, says she's already seen changes intended to reduce fraud. They are changing things rapidly. In addition to the corporate documents that you have to file, they have cracked down to the point that you have to have a copy of the driver's license of the person signing the forms. We definitely see that benefit of doing that, but the impact of the transportation industry is yet to be seen. I think any additional steps is always best, right? Like I truly do. Like, you should have an ID to do anything in this country, right? Like, if you're going to register a business, vote, any of that, you should have an ID. They should be able to see this is who you actually are. And, again, yes, there's fake IDs and all the other bullshit. Like, I get all of that. But again, I think that and because Kyle, you and I have talked about this a lot. The best way to fight fraud, is to keep using the good actors, the people who are doing it time and time again. But again, you need to have and this is the same thing with any carrier out there. Carriers, you can quiz your brokers on this, and brokers, you guys should be pressing your carriers on this as well. The less details that you provide, the more inclined the scammers are to want to work with you, because they don't care about any of that stuff, right? They want bare bones basic stuff. But if you have a higher barrier to entry to work with you, you deter a lot of the fraudulent carriers out there, or a lot of the bad actors out there, because they don't want to deal with that bullshit. They don't want to deal with people who have their ducks in line. They just want to deal with the people who clearly do not care.
Yeah, absolutely. You can screen out troublemakers pretty quick by just asking direct questions that sound like they should have simple answers, but for scammers, they don't have simple answers. Like, you tell them, give them a detail that may not necessarily be true. Say something like, this load has to cross onto government property, so the driver's going to need a TWIC card. Can I see that TWIC card? Right? Yeah. Click. Scammers are gone. Right? Somebody who's legit might counter that with a question like, "Are you sure?" but we're happy to provide that TWIC card. We're happy to provide a copy of the driver's license for the driver, or we're happy to send you a picture of the truck we're going to send, right? You ask for any of these minor details. Anybody who balks at that was planning to rip you off. And it's actually very simple. But, what we do, we focus so much on helping brokers spot fraudulent carriers, but we always forget that there are two sides to that coin, right? There are two heads to that hydra, so to speak, because for every false carrier that's out there getting loads tendered to them that they intend to rebroker, on the other side, they have an affiliated fraudulent broker who is then out there reselling that load to legitimate carriers. So it's equally important for carriers to be able to screen their brokers too. Right. Yeah. So, and if any carriers are watching the show today, there are a few simple things you can do too, by remembering that almost all of these false fraudulent brokers are overseas operations operating on VoIP phone banks, right? So when you talk to one of them, get somebody on the phone. Don't do business exclusively by email. If you are using email, pay very close attention to what the email looks like. Is this person claiming to be from TQL, but their email address is tlq.com? Is it going to be something like that? Right? Pay very close attention to that. But when you get them on the phone, listen, does it sound like a bad staticky phone connection? Like it's a VoIP phone that's 3-4, on that, what is that? Like it's a VoIP phone that's on the other side of the ocean. Maybe. Yeah. And at the risk of sounding xenophobic, but unfortunately we have to be. Does this person say that their name is Kevin, but they have a really thick Serbian accent? This is, these are just red flags you need to look for. If you don't feel good about that broker you're talking to, you're probably dealing with the broker side of a scam operation, right? Yeah. So carriers can help to combat this too by only accepting loads from brokers who seem legitimate and trustworthy and can roger up all the information you asked for too.
Yeah. And another thing that I'm seeing out there from the carrier community as well is like, it seems like they're not asking questions to the brokers that they're working with, right? Because like I've seen a trend out there where it's like the carriers talking about how they had agreed to $1,700 for a rate, and then they got a rate con for $1,600, and then they didn't notice it for 24 or 48 hours or something like that. And then they tried to go back, and it just turns into a massive he said, she said. And that's why it's like, check your documentation prior. I would even go as far, if I was a driver, if there's information out there, like I would Google the address, I would make sure, find out what this is, find out. I would even go as far, if I owned a truck, where I would call the facility, verify that PO number that they gave me is valid. And then I would do anything I could to make sure that I got paid, right? Like I would never just take somebody's word for it blindly right away that they are who they are. If I, because like I just think, like at the end of the day, these carriers, these small trucking companies, these are the guys who are getting burnt. These are the ones who are getting screwed. And all it takes is them holding the brokers accountable. Because again, you guys, I've been brokering freight for like 14 years. I've never received a bill of lading from a customer or load information from a customer that didn't have the name, address, and contact information at the shipper or the receiver, the product information, the weights, the piece counts. I've never, ever moved a load that didn't have that. Now, has there been changes to commodities after a load's been sent over? Yes, but I will let the driver know, hey, this is the change. They're adding this piece. They're subtracting this piece. Here's the revised documents. All of that stuff kind of comes along with it. So it's like, you got to hold your partners accountable here. You really do. You have to ask questions. And if they're not willing to give you that information, my friends that are carriers, do not book that load. All right. Do not book that load. But
legitimate people with good intentions never dodge questions.
Yes. Very true. So that right there is exactly what is needed to say. And we're already at the top of the hour, Kyle. So that flew by, man. Check us out, you guys, brokercarrier.com. All right. If you guys have any questions, you guys know how to find me. You can reach out to Kyle and everything direct as well. You guys, Kyle at brokercarrier.com. We're here to help. At the end of the day, you guys, we're here to help. We're working on this. We got our free tool out there. If you guys want to learn more, hit us up. We're here to help out in any way we can. I got guests coming on this week, you guys, a lot, actually. I think almost every day, possibly. But we'll be back tomorrow You guys, we got a new newsletter that drops every single Friday. Go to thefreightcoach.com to register for that. I'm not going to auto register all of my contacts in there. I hate when people do that to me. So if you guys want to check out the Freight Coach's new newsletter that drops every Friday, go to thefreightcoach.com and check it out. I appreciate you guys. I love you guys, and we'll be talking to you soon. All right.